Hello, Lucy. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I know it's always a busy time getting ready for an exhibition. I just want to ask you a couple of questions about the background of the exhibition and working up to it. So, what was the inspiration?
Okay, Life of Objects. It's kind of an umbrella statement for work that I have been working on for years and years and years. And there's some new work in this exhibition, certainly, and some experimental work. But I've been sort of rehashing ideas that have been playing around in my head. And I think having this time over COVID has certainly given me the time sort of to reinvent old images and look at old images, play with images, cut them up, reassemble them, that sort of thing. In 2006, I was very lucky to go to New Orleans. It was just after Hurricane Katrina. And I made a series of drawings, which became a whole series of colourgraph prints called Street Furniture. And essentially, I was kind of starting to look at how people's relationship with objects is and the importance of objects and some kind of way that maybe some people have a relationship with music or with memories and books. And I have a real affiliation with objects. I've collected things and have hoarded little collections of things for many years. But what I find I'm doing now is I'm starting to get rid of a lot of stuff, getting a lot of it to the dump, getting a lot of it to, well, before COVID, to charity shops. And I don't know why I'm doing this, but maybe it's an age thing, I don't know, but I'm just suddenly starting to get rid of things. But I've been documenting them with little drawings and photographs, and these have sort of come into my work for this exhibition.
So it's almost like a transition period, but this started then before COVID.
Yeah. I mean, I've always used objects in my art, and when we started talking about this, I sort of looked over my back catalogue in my head. I did a lot of work based on crockery of my family, crockery that I found in auction houses. As I mentioned, the street furniture series from New Orleans, and then whenever the same period of that, I was in Cuba. And that's a completely different thing because their idea of objects is all fixed and hand built and stuck together with bits of tape. And then on the opposite of that is that you have, for example, the Capitol building, which is like a beacon in amongst all this poverty. And you see all of these chandeliers, bright lights. And it's just that sort of difference of wealth and poverty, using objects as sort of some sort of a symbol for that almost.
You're talking a lot about the discrepancies between those who have and those who don't have. And some of the work that you have made for this exhibition is related to found objects or made with found objects or found, upcycling, recycling work that you have and grounds that you're using.
Well, you see, it's kind of interesting because of the COVID pandemic. We've all had this sort of unusual period to work at home, work in your studio, and maybe for the first time in a long time, I know I've spoken to a lot of my contemporaries, that this has been a really interesting period for just to step back and have a look at what you have and what you've been working on, why you've been working on it. Because I think we all end up on this treadmill. And certainly from my point of view, as part of my practice, I'm genuinely interested in making a series of commercial artworks, which essentially purely to make money. I've just taken a bit more time thinking about, looking through sketchbooks, rethinking ideas that I've touched on possibly in the past. And I think now it's just given me a bit more time just to remake it and make the work.
Are there any particular pieces of work that you think really typify this in the exhibition? Or is it a thread running through all the pieces of work?
There's kind of one piece that's come to mind. I haven't got a title for it yet, but it's inspired by work that I did recently with a group of travellers. We made some bird boxes. We made them out of ceramic, and they were kind of to represent this group of men who didn't have a permanent address. So taking that sort of idea, I've made this little group of little houses, and I've made them from my old prints, which I've stacked together to make a sort of like a new piece of work, and sort of bubbled out of that is these little houses. They have corrugated roofs, and they kind of reminded me of the footage of camps that we're seeing at the minute throughout the world with people living displaced, and these sort of houses that are made out of bits and pieces. And the resilience of making these houses is to be admired, and as much as it is to be sort of pitied. I don't know. I'm sort of looking at that sort of idea.
In a way, this exhibition has come out of your experience in COVID and being able to look back and reflect, a reflection of what you're seeing on the media, and it links in with other projects that you've done.
I don't think it's so much the media. I think it's more personal than that. I think it's about meeting people who don't have. I work in Mugabe prison. I work in communities which have very little. And it's just interesting, you know, when we have so much stuff. Do you know what I was thinking about the other day is Michael Landley's Breakdown. He was the artist who shredded all of his possessions.
Yes.
And it's interesting because he was in his 20s when he did that. And I was kind of thinking, you know, in your 20s, that would be quite liberating, because I don't think at that point you've settled with roots. You maybe don't have a family. Yeah. You don't have responsibility of needing a roof over your head. And then that's the sort of thing you do in your 30s, 40s, 50s. And interestingly now, for example, my mum is totally getting rid of everything. She's in her late 70s. And that is something that people, you know.
Yes, I've noticed that, you know, my own parents wouldn't be gathering things about them so much. There's much less need for objects, or the acquisition of objects.
And you know, when I started doing the artisan markets, the demographic of people who buy my work would be young, maybe getting their first homes. You know, whenever older people come, they say, "Oh yes, I have no room in my house for any more paintings and pictures," and it's kind of because you know they don't want them. You know what I mean? They've done all of that, so. And I know this is nothing. This is what I've just been thinking about over COVID, and about clearing out my artwork and why am I keep holding on to this. And I think it's just sort of like merging ideas. And I think it's because I have the time to sit and think, and working with the groups of travellers, which I work with quite intently, and their idea of not having anything compared to what we have. And I think on a global scale, we can see that a lot more with the media, you know. Yeah. The lino cuts is quite interesting, and that they are slightly separate from these more experimental pieces of work. These are floor tiles from the Great Hall in Mount Stuart. They were given to us for a project, and I kept some of them, and I've just been using them, and they're a very distinctive shape, 33 centimetres by 33 centimetres. So Mount Stuart is down the Ards Peninsula, and a lot of these images, certainly the ones that will be shown in the exhibition, are inspired by that environment. Locale, Downpatrick, Strangford Lough, and they're printed on Irish linen.
Where did you source the linen?
So a lot of the linen that I get is seconds from Ballymena, and I also buy a lot of linen online. Interestingly, linen, if you find a good source, is actually cheaper than paper, which I find a bit bizarre. Yeah. I can buy rolls of linen. The affordability is there compared to what it would be if I was using a fine art paper.
Can I ask you a wee question then? What is the difference between printing on linen and paper, and what type of printing are you doing?
Two different printing techniques that I'm using in the exhibition. And you'll understand this, Aaron, because you're a maker, and I'm very much an advocate for a process. Process is very important in my practice, and it leads more in the experiment than the image that I have in my mind. So screen printing on linen has been a revelation to me, because with paper, it comes to a point that you can't really go further with experimenting, because the paper starts to cockle or it starts to break down. But with linen, I've actually put some linen in water and washed bits of it away, some of the image away, dried it and reprinted on it, and that's something that you certainly couldn't do with paper. So that's been quite interesting, and some of the mark making techniques are completely different, and also because it's linen, it absorbs the ink, so the richness of the ink and the colours, I think, is a lot stronger.
Interesting.
The other process is lino, and I'm using oil-based inks with that, which gives a certain intensity that you certainly don't get with water-based. Again, printing on raw linen, the ink is absorbed into the material, and I just think there's a softness from the lino. Lino usually is quite black and white, and generally is printed in black and white, and you get a very sharp line. But the linen, because it's quite furry, gives a softness to the image, which I quite like. There's one thing that's floating around a lot in my images, and it's something I've been using for a while, is circles. Again, this is something that I've only noted really because I've been pulling all my prints out and looking at it, and these little dots have been bubbling to the surface for I'm sure over a decade now, and I know it's some kind of energy. And I think because I'm using objects, I think it's almost like how I can introduce something human, because they're almost like little cells, and they sort of potter about and they bubble up throughout a lot of my images. So I've rehashed the dot, and it's plays a big part in this new work. There's 3 pieces of work, the new work, which is vases of flowers. The artwork's called Sentiment, and I think I'm looking at what is more important, the vase or the flowers that are in the vase, and sort of that connection. Again, it's about the object thing, but it's more about the process of making the image that was important in those pieces.
That leads quite nicely into maybe wrapping up this conversation. And then the next time we'll be talking, we'll maybe have the exhibition in front of us.
Yeah.
And we can go into a little bit more detail. And thank you very much for, as I say, taking the time to have a chat. I know you're very, very busy this week getting ready to get everything finished and framed for the exhibition.
Thank you. Thank you, Zara, for taking the time. I mean, and we're all busy. It's one of those weeks.
Okay, well, Lucy, I will be hopefully talking to you very soon, and good luck with the rest of the week. Looking forward to seeing the work up in the exhibition.
Thank you.